And the fact that the public is all of us, we've done this for each other. I'll get to a great example of how Mary Burke could have done that. But
yeah, I just read the little blue book that Phil gave me.
Oh, there you go.
The public, and I like that. And we were talking about that on our hour trip coming up. So
yeah.
Using the word the public.
Yep. And the idea that freedom is not possible without the public, and that we are all the public. It's all of us. It's not this scary institution. You know, God, I love going to Washington D.C. Oh man.
There's a natural resources from which private enterprise extracts its elements to produce its profits.
Yep. And who owns the air?
Public.
It's public, right?
How do you define the public?
All of us.
The public is basically government
Anything
in any form, local.
There's anything other than self is non-self is government. I mean, the government is a term that defines a collective, the collective that is everything but me.
And not private enterprise.
All of us in our public sphere, in our non-private sphere, it's everything that we are, and certainly as living in a democracy, it's the combination of the government and everything that's outside of our, even private business.
And it encompasses a whole slew of ideas, right? It's the resources we provide to government as the public. It's all of us collectively at every different community level. I mean, you have a school board is the public, right? I mean, a local government is the public, state government. I mean, it's a very broad term.
Our physical infrastructure, the bridges and roads, the sewers.
Something that has been provided through
That's where our
government.
power lies.
Power lines, yep.
Yep.
If it's run by private enterprises, but it's regulated by the public, the energy
Right.
system.
Right. You have the private, which is private corporations, private individuals, that kind of thing.
Right.
Okay.
For profit.
For profit, and sometimes not for profit. I mean, there are nonprofits that are private, right? They don't receive public.
What I'm saying is that in linguistics we would say what you have there is a primitive term.
Of course, it's a primitive term.
It's a term which is undefined generally and collectively.
No, it's defined. It's understood through metaphor.
Correct, but that's a new term, the public.
Oh, it's a very old term.
As you're using it, it is a new term.
No, it is a term that is largely not used in public discourse now because the dominant term for this is government.
I think you find it in Pericles, you find it in the Greeks.
Yeah, I mean this is it's a new term. Look,
In Latin.
look. I mean,
Latin word.
we have to agree that what I'm calling the public is government. And I'm saying the public because I don't want you to reinforce the negative conservative metaphor for government, which is this big evil thing that's going to take away personal liberty.
So as we develop our frames, we use the public as an alternative to the term, to that, however many letters there are on that word.
Right.
G word.
The G word. Right, exactly.
Yeah,
Right.
the conservatives have denigrated the word government.
Government. Right.
The public, by repeating what our definitions, all the things about what
Right.
we want to call the public.
I don't need to if I'm in look,
Positive word.
if I'm in, let's say, Heartland, Wisconsin, with a group of people, and I say the public, people will know what that means. There's a metaphorical understanding of the public that everybody has. You're struggling with it because you're viewing it in specific, you're thinking of it in specific linguistic terms as a word in and of itself without context. The context is the metaphor that is unconsciously understood as the public.
I guess, I mean, I don't.
So there is a metaphor that's subconsciously understood as the government, and they are separate
Yeah. They have different, right, they evoke different ideas.
in different people, but the thing is
Right.
that when you're out in the suburbs or in the hustings, and you use the word public, you're stimulating a synaptic response that is not the same as.
That is more of people,
Use the G word.
people in the commons as opposed to government, which is this scary, dark thing. And we're getting a little in the weeds here. So, so we need to, yeah,
Just one,
yeah,
we don't hear it as a word by itself so much as public or private.
Right.
So so it's the public versus the private.
right,
You know,
Yeah.
conservatives want the private to rule, we want
Right.
the public.
and we'll get to that in a bit.
I have
So,
just a quick
Quick,
question.
very quick, because we're gonna move.
Okay.
I understand everything you're saying. I'm just saying, if you walked out this door and down onto Broadway, and you said to someone, "the public," they would think you were talking about all the citizens who are walking down Broadway. They would not.
If you've provided no context, you've provided no context for that phrase.
Context.
Right. But we're trying to get at the fact that the government is formed by us and the power
Right.
lies in us.
Context is critical, which is why I said you can't take the term "the public" as a standalone phrase without providing the context of the frame. So, and linguistically, that's what I'm saying. If I am saying that term to you, if I say "the public," you understand what I mean because of the context of this presentation and who I am.
And is that why you say the public instead of the commons? Because
Yes.
okay.
Yep. All right, so here's Elizabeth Warren. I've been trying to find better, more recent examples of this, but it doesn't exist. This is just the best. The best.
I hear all this, well, this is class warfare, this is whatever. No, there is nobody in this country who got rich on his own. Nobody. You built a factory out there, good for you, but I want to be clear. You moved your goods to market on the roads the rest of us paid for. You hired workers the rest of us paid to educate. You were safe in your factory because of police forces and fire forces that the rest of us paid for. You didn't have to worry that marauding bands would come and seize everything at your factory and hire someone to protect against this because of the work the rest of us did. Now look, you built a factory and it turned into something terrific or a great idea. God bless. Keep a big hunk of it. But part of the underlying social contract is you take a hunk of that and pay forward for the next kid who comes in.
Okay, so why is that important when she says pay it forward? Because empathy means responsibility for others. Right? So that social contract includes the responsibility to pay it forward for next generations.
So where is it in the Republican framing
Hold on, we're going to
where they badmouth social contracts?
hold that thought. Here we are. All right, so now the conservative frame. So you have the progressive, empathy, responsibility, community, very powerful in the progressive frame, the idea of community, having responsibility in your community. The strict father, okay. You have the authority figure is the highest moral authority. Whether it's God, the president, Scott Walker, right? This is really important. That person defines right and wrong.
This is undisputed, unvalidated authority.
Correct. Think of the Old Testament God. They define right and wrong and they rule through punishment.
Which is Old Testament.
And that punishment should be painful. Because if it's not painful, you'll never learn your lesson.
Fire and brimstone.
Yep. You become moral through self-discipline. Again, think Old Testament. Okay? Children are born bad. This is what conservatives believe. Children are born bad, and the father has a moral responsibility to make them good through discipline and punishment.
That's original sin, right?
Exactly. You have responsibility for yourself alone. Think of the whole idea of you need to be you have to be, self-initiative, independent, pull yourself up by your bootstraps. Even the whole idea of, the conservative idea of economics. If everybody, the invisible hand idea, if everybody pursued their own self-interest, then everybody would be better, right? That's the idea.
Trickle down.
So the conservative term of democracy, and you can apply this to any issue, it provides maximum liberty, personal liberty, to seek your own self-interest without regard for others or responsibility for others. You have no responsibility for anyone else but yourself. And if everybody did that, the world would be a better place. That's basically it.
That's why Ayn Rand says greed is the highest virtue.
Exactly. So this is really important because conservatives, when they talk about the economy and everything, they're not mean, greedy, and stupid. Okay, this is how their moral system works. If you are successful because you are disciplined. Which makes you what? Moral. Moral. If you are not successful, that means one thing. You're not moral. You just need to be disciplined more.
What's the difference between success and achievement? What is success?
We're talking about success in terms of, in their frame, it means wealthy, well-off, affluent.
No, money.
Yes.
Materialism.
Yep.
Okay.
Here's the answer to your question. In the conservative moral frame, the public is immoral because it takes away the incentives for your personal success. Think about taxes, regulation. That's why conservatives say it's our money. That's why they talk about open for business. Take away regulation.
For sale.
In order for this moral system to work, they have to hide a fundamental truth, which progressives believe, and that is that private depends on the public. You hear this all the time because they talk about building up private enterprise. If we just let the job creators do their thing, the economy will be better. If we just take away the regulation, the bureaucratic red tape, then the economy will get going because it's the public it's the government's in the way. You hear this all the time. Government's getting in the way. They hide that truth, and they should be called out on it all the time.
Well, they extract the resources that are the public for
Yep.
for manipulating their product,
Yep.
which generates their revenue.
Yep. Here's a brilliant interview. You're going to hear how good this guy is. This is the Young America's Foundation. They have chapters in colleges and universities all over the country. And they're basically young college-age conservatives. And this is based on the Reagan Time for Choosing speech. This is the 50th anniversary. I'll do a couple pauses here during the critical parts so you don't miss it.
You could give that speech today, not tell people who it was, just play it, play the audio of that, and I think people would find it just as compelling today as it was the day he gave it. And there's a difference between right and left, and it's not one side or the other, it's whether we're going upward and forward, or whether we're going down and backwards. And
Metaphor. Right? Conservatives are going up and forward, and progressives are going down and backwards. And he even said it's not right or left. Metaphor.
people will relook at those incredible words over and over again as we celebrate the 50th anniversary. people like President Obama and his allies tended to measure success in government by how many people were dependent in the government, by how many people were on Medicaid and food stamps and unemployment. That we as conservatives should measure success in government by just the opposite, by how many people are no longer dependent.
You hear that all the time. And yet, no progressive in Congress, except for Elizabeth Warren and a few others, will say, no, that private prosperity depends on the public. The two are intertwined. You can't have one without the other.
Didn't Bernie Sanders come out with that, but then he had to deal with Baltimore?
I love Bernie. Too factual. You know, you hear him on Thom Hartmann, and he's fact.
The optimism that comes out in me is the optimism I received from
You're gonna love this.
Reagan and then just Ronald Reagan, was the fact that he saw a brighter side out of people. He understood that the real strength of America came in our people and not of our government.
The strength of America came from the people, not the government. I'm sorry, who's the government?
Yeah, right.
I mean, if you challenged him with that, think of how powerful that would be to people. Say, wait a minute, we're the government. We elected you, you phony.
But people actually don't believe they're the government anymore because they've been told it for 50 years, and now they believe it.
Exactly.
People actually say that to you.
But if that's not the G word.
Exactly. So, you get the idea. And remember, these are not partisan. There are Republicans that think progressive. There are Democrats that think conservative. They're all over the place. These are two moral structures. And we'll see later, you can be both. So, some things that progressives make mistakes on all the time. Just the facts doesn't win votes. Okay, first of all politics are moral. I did some work with a school board recently, I won't say who it was, and they all said, we're afraid to go out and talk about this referendum because we don't want to be political. I said, you are an elected body that creates public policy. Your job is political. You know, the University of Illinois at Chicago, the University of Illinois is going through the same thing that Wisconsin did because their Republican governor has put out a 9% cut across the board for higher education. 9%. And they have a democratically dominated legislature that's not going, maybe we can do 3. Right? The U of I Faculty Senate, they asked me for my advice, and I said, you need to do a community campaign. You need to get UIC out in the Chicago neighborhood where it is, and it needs to be part of the community. People need to understand it metaphorically as a human being so they have empathy for it, and they come together, the businesses, the students, the faculty. They said, no, we can't do that. That's too political.
Are they confusing political with partisan?
Yes, exactly. And my point to them was, you are the faculty senate of a public university. Your positions are inherently political. You know, you have an obligation to take a moral stand for the university. Anyway, but this, you see, you probably see this all the time. People are afraid to be political, which is why for this messaging and framing, we take it from political into the moral sphere. So now you're not talking to people about politics or specific issues, you're talking about things you care, moral values with people, and that's really important. Okay. I said conservatives aren't mean, greedy, and stupid. They're not. I know a lot of them. They're nice people. We have different moral views on things, but they're pretty nice people. They create these policies because they believe they're morally right. Paul Ryan isn't going to say, I pass my budget because it's terrible, it's going to kill people, and I'm a mean, greedy person. No, he believes it's morally right. Policies are based on values, and this is where progressives make big mistakes. People use frames to define common sense. So when we talk about the public, requiring context and a framing for the term the public, so people understand what we're talking about, they use that physically and unconsciously to define what common sense is. So facts need to be framed in order for people to understand them and process them. You know, if I'm speaking in front of a group of people and I say there's, 15,000 tons of sand being removed from western Wisconsin every day. So?
What's wrong with that?
Right. It's creating jobs. That's what they said, it's creating jobs. I have to provide a framing for it. We'll get to that later. Oops. So the facts need context. Here's a great example of facts not winning votes. Oops. So you remember around the election time, the 10 days of early voting and the 10 reasons to vote against Scott Walker? Do any of you remember more than one or two of those? Do any of you remember any of them?
Nope. Don't remember any of it.
Mm-hmm.
I remember the campaign.
So let's talk about some other misconceptions from a cognitive standpoint. There's no such thing as a centrist or moderate. Okay? There is no ideology of the middle. People are biconceptual, right? This is why people voted for Scott Walker. Well, no, people voted for Scott Walker, but then the same people in their communities would vote in favor of a referendum to raise the minimum wage.
Yeah.
Or
Right to, or amend.
or move to or to amend, corporations aren't people. People are biconceptual. It's very common. Why did it happen? This is because those people identified with Scott Walker as their conservative moral leader. And yet, on a bigger fairness issue, Wisconsinites it's in our DNA. Fairness, progressive ideas are in our DNA because of our heritage. They believed in the fairness of a minimum wage. Very simple. So, right, everybody's...
How does that square with hypocognition?
Because it's there unconsciously in their brain. Hypocognition means that the language is not there to effectively communicate those ideas. Just the background on that term, there was a social scientist doing research on a Pacific island of a native population who were having incredibly high increase in suicide rates. And when they went and they did the research, what they found was there was a huge Western influx into this native population, Western technology, Western foods, Western ideas, and it was creating a lot of stress on the civilization, and the civilization had no language to communicate pain and suffering. So they killed themselves. And this is back in the 1960s, coined the term hypocognition, because the language to express that feeling, those values, did not exist. So that's where that came from. But what happens is, because most people have the capacity for both progressive and conservative frames, when you activate that frame through effective language, you reinforce it, you strengthen it, and then you inhibit the other. So here's a good example. So let's say that you have a conservative friend who loves their public school. There's a lot that do, especially in rural areas. It's the cultural center of the community. They go there for football games. There are kids in the band. They go to the whatever activity. So it's a social center, and they love their public school. You activate empathy for their public schools in the progressive frame, and you activate the frame and strengthen it. And then eventually you can work those values into conversations about other issues. And it strengthens the progressive frame in their brain. Just like if you watch a TV commercial and you see something, oh God, what was the commercial I just saw? don't remember what it was. Oh, it was for a beer, some beer commercial about how great your life would be if you drank this beer and how affluent you would be and how wonderful your life would be. It reinforces that conservative frame of success, prosperity, because of your own self-interest in partaking in that product. It's really powerful stuff. And yes, the ad agencies have known about this for a long time, which is another reason why conservatives are good at this and progressives are bad. Because conservatives go to school and what do they study? Marketing, and they learn all the, right? And what do progressives study? Philosophy, and they learn the Descartesian Enlightenment reason, right? So just real quick, why does that happen? Because every time people think, they frame, right? So you're the public, getting back to this phrase, the public, right? Every time you say the public in a specific context, it is framed by the context of where you are physically, right? And when they think, they frame through this process called neural binding. Neural binding is from one region of the brain to the other, connections through the neural networks. So to be effective, here's what we need to start doing. We talked about unconscious and conscious. We need to start consciously choosing language that evokes the progressive frame over and over and over again, even if people disagree. So it reinforces it.
Is there an ethical conflict in there when you say we're consciously going to approach this? Are we guilty of manipulating somebody?
Oh, I'm so glad you asked that question.
Weakness?
Right. Is this propaganda? Is it?
Yes. Yeah.
No, it's not. No, because what's propaganda? Right. Right.
That's true.
Right. Propaganda is intentional misinformation. Right? All you are doing is you're using effective language to tell the truth about the things you care about.
This is basically what you go to law school for.
Right? This is effective communication of the things you care about.
Went to law school. Conservatives who went to law school are there for another.
No. You go to law school to frame the facts in the way you want
Right.
them to be seen.
Okay.
Yep. So this is a friend of mine, Melissa Sargent, state representative for Madison. If you want to see good framing, follow her on Twitter, Facebook, watch her press releases. Melissa Sargent, Sargent. She's a state rep from Madison. She's really good at this. Listen to how she talks about public schools.
Hi, State Representative Melissa Sargent here. I'm just returning from school visits. I visited 3 schools today, and I think that brings us up to about 10 schools visited since just this last couple of months. And what I'm seeing in our public schools here in Madison are children who are learning, children who are part of a community, children who feel safe and are taking care of one another.
Children who are safe, who are part of a community, and who are taking care of each other and learning. They're not learning how to get a job. They're learning. The other thing that she said that's really important is this whole idea of that community. I can't emphasize enough how powerful community is with people. We all want to be part of something bigger than ourselves. It's in our genes. It's in our DNA. Nobody wants to be left on an island.
So why don't we say community instead of the public?
You could.
Okay.
You could say, well, okay, sorry, the public is specifically about, is government. The public is specifically the functional word for government. The community is more of maybe the collective, but you can use community at a lot of different levels. Community can be a school. Community can be a state. I mean, the world could be a community. So
That's what fascinates me, that Jefferson County, the Tea Party, Fort Atkinson schools passed the school referendum every single time exactly with framing by Dr. Fitzpatrick.
Yeah, because they get it. I mean, and they don't even have to get a